Since the beginning with the brown box, the gaming industry has been pushing the limits of gaming and how we interact with them. Stereoscopic technology was one of the attempts to give players a more immersive experience to flat screens. Let's take a further look at this tech and how it was incorporated into video games, where it began, its fad, and fizzle. Lenny Lipton, author, filmmaker, and even lyricist, had a fascination with 3D as a child. After writing the hit Puff the Magic Dragon in 1963, the supplemental income from royalties allowed him to pursue his passion towards this new world. Assisting as a convergence setter for a 3D movie in 1983, this was his first experience into the world of 3D. Lenny believed he could improve upon what was currently available, and formed the company Stereographics in 1980. He created a prototype of field sequential 3D display technology that was flicker-free. 9 years later, he patented Z-screen technology to use with stereoscopic 3D for projection. And in 2005, his company Stereographics was acquired by RealD, which utilized his patented technology for RealD 3D cinemas across the globe. Despite this being only for multimedia use for viewing, this infantile technology also had a root in video games as well. Being developed first initially for a 3D TV, the game Sub-Rock 3D started development in 1980. This was during the time Sega and Matsushita, now known as Panasonic, were looking to create a stereo viewer system to modify the planned 3D TV for the purpose of video games. Sub-Rock 3D used the Active Shutter 3D system paired with a proprietary eyepiece viewing device. Players would press their faces against a periscope-like eyepiece attached to the controller. It was shown to the public for the first time at the Amusement and Music Operations show in 1981. Sub-Rock 3D was a great hit for Sega at the arcades. It was later ported to the home consoles like the ColecoVision, but just as Sub-Rock without the 3D simulated effects and shutter system. Prior to 1982, this was the first time 3D technology was seen as a serious addition to gaming and impressed many. The toy company Tomy released a series of 3D handhelds around this time, called the Tomytronic 3D. Lacking the more lavish but expensive shutter system, this only had simulated 3D with 2 LCD panels like a Viewmaster did. Only a handful of games and handhelds were released for this Tomytronic platform, and not much is known about these niche devices, so it is unknown if these were a hit for Tomy. However, due to the niche and cult status of this device and a lack of a large library, with the video game crash occurring that year, it was likely not a financial success for the company. In terms of game accessories for 3D, GCE and Milton Bradley were the first in 1984 with the GCE 3D Imager. Made for the ill-fated Vectrex, releasing only a year shy before the disastrous video game crash of 1983. The GCE worked by using a color wheel which was inserted into the 3D Imager device. The unit was then placed on the user's head, and during gameplay, the Imager would spin the wheel in front of the player's vision. One side was a color wheel colored while the other was black. This would give the false illusion of one screen. To give the fake effect of 3D, the vector lines were drawn twice on screen. However, due to the lackluster sales of the Vectrex itself and the ongoing crash of '83 that would not be resolved until 2 years later in 1985, there were only 3 officially released games for it, with one, despite being advertised in the box, being cancelled and never released. Before the 3DS and other stereoscopic experimental projects, Nintendo in 1987 released the Famicom 3D headset in Japan for $40. The device connected to the expansion port that, unlike the NES in North America, had support for many peripherals. The Famicom 3D system used active shutters, and with the push of a button, usually select, the stereoscopic mode would activate. When activated, supported games would create a ghost of the same game with the 3D flicker going back and forth, covering each eye individually at rapid speed, giving the illusion of depth. Unfortunately, it was a failed endeavor for Nintendo, with critics complaining about the accessory being bulky and the small selection of games, with only 7 total titles marking its final game releasing in November 24, 1989. Because the 3D system was declared a failure only a little after a year on the market, it was never released outside of Japan. North American releases for these games, like Rad Racer and 3D World Runner, their stereoscopic shutter support was removed and was replaced with more simplistic and cost-effective paper anaglyph glasses that came in the box. During the life of the Sega Master System, Sega utilized the help of gaming industry veteran Mark Cerny to develop a peripheral for the console for 3D technology. Dubbed in Japan the Sega 3D Glasses, the Sega Scope 3D Glasses in North America was released in October of 1988. It sold for $40 and only had 8 games total. None were original titles, and all were just current Master System games with a 3D mode feature. As to be expected, the Sega Scope was a miss for Sega. This was due to the 2-year exclusivity deals Nintendo brokered with most noteworthy publishers, and the Master System itself already being left in the dust, having more of a following in non-North American countries like Brazil. Allegedly, the 3D glasses and 3D shutters were loud and distracting, and Sega went to work fast to evolve this technology for a new up-and-coming tech, which was slated to set the world by a storm. Konami even released a 3D viewer for the PlayStation Portable for viewing special videos in 3D for their game Metal Gear Acid 2, a game which was bundled with the hardware when it came out in 2006. The Tobit Acid Solid Eye did not use a red and blue anaglyph technology, but instead, the media on the screen produced a copy side by side which the Solid Eye would combine together. It was usable in Metal Gear Acid 2 for viewing a variety of content, including a handful of 3D-enabled Metal Gear Solid 3 cutscenes, an early look at Metal Gear Solid 4 in 3D, and unlockable, fan service content. The Solid Eye was the only 3D peripheral for the PSP that was ever released. Borrowing from the Sega Scope shutter technology, Nvidia invented their own shutter glasses in 2009 called the Nvidia 3D Vision, priced at a whopping $199. 3D Vision provided stereoscopic games for supported titles and was usable with LCD and CRT monitors. The 3D Vision provided 3D stereoscopic support to a total of about 38 3D Vision-ready games. 2 years later after launch, an improved follow-up was released with Light Boost technology, which claimed brighter colors and display. While Nvidia actually attempted to put effort into this technology, major publishers and developers only gave it a chance for a few years, and ultimately abandoned it after 2013 with no titles providing 3D support after this. Unfortunately, just as a common trend with this subject, support for the 3D Vision never took off, and 3D Vision drivers were actually pulled from future Nvidia updates a decade later. 3 years after the PS3's initial launch in 2006, Sony presented a 3D demonstration at CES 2009 with Wipeout HD and Gran Turismo 5. A year later, Sony released 3D support for the console with the 3.30 update, and to coincide with the release of 3D support, Sony sold a PS3 3D display for $500 on November 13, 2011. The price was standard for the typical 24-inch size 3D display compared to others during the same time. Besides being a 3D-enabled TV, the PlayStation display had SimulView support. With SimulView-enabled games, split-screen gaming was a thing of the past, with SimulView being able to display 2 individual screens for 2 users with 3D glasses. This feature was advertised prominently for MotorStorm Apocalypse, which was bundled with the TV. Despite SimulView being a very interesting and state-of-the-art technology, it was only supported in a total of 9 games. PS3 stereoscopic support was at an all-time high in 2011, but died out around 2013, marking the end of mainstream 3D support with about 58 titles total. Microsoft's Xbox 360 had support for 3D as well, however, it suffered the same fate and lifespan and the same number of supported games. 3D on the 360, though, was mostly supported by third-party publishers, with Microsoft not going as deep as Sony did with their initial obsession of stereoscopic 3D. During the development of the Nintendo GameCube, Satoru Iwata wanted the GameCube to have an official LCD screen accessory. This was similar to Sony's PS1 portable screen, which released in 2002. While Iwata's concept was shown off at E3 this same year, it never released. In 2011, Iwata revealed some information about this hardware in an Iwata Asked interview about the LCD screen, and mentioned that it had hidden, unannounced, glasses-free stereoscopic 3D support. The interviewer, Hideki Kano, admitted that he was tasked to help develop a 3D version of Luigi's Mansion after development of the original one finished. In the interview, Iwata said they could sadly not get over the idea of how to sell it to consumers and still make it profitable for Nintendo. During that time, liquid crystal display technology was cutting edge and therefore expensive. Because of this fact, Iwata said that the LCD 3D portable screen accessory would have had to have been priced more expensive potentially than the GameCube console itself, which was $199 at launch. In the end, it was decided that having customers buy an additional screen accessory would always make support niche and not mainstream. While the 3D technology in the GameCube and 3D version of Luigi's Mansion never released, it eventually combined the glasses-free 3D idea and the 3D version of Luigi's Mansion with the Nintendo 3DS. While the Virtual Boy was a disappointment for Nintendo, after a brief price drop, the 3DS was a massive success for the company, having a total number of 75 million units sold, along with 392 million games sold from 2011 to 2020. With the Nintendo 3DS being the only exception as having mass success in the market from being 3D driven, 3D was also eventually a short-lived casualty for Nintendo as well, 2 years after the original 3DS launch in 2011. In 2013, Nintendo released a 2DS, which lacked 3D. During this time, a majority of high-profile first-party and third-party games omitted 3D support. For the next 7 years, Nintendo focused on the 3DS line as a portable Nintendo handheld game system and not for its glasses-free 3D features. So, why did stereoscopic gaming die out then? A common trend with each of these items was initial interest but lack of staying power and commitment from either the consumer or companies behind them. Most items and 3D-enabled products only had a life of about 2 years or even less for some of these mentioned. Many of these products also had an additional high cost point, and added with a limited library meant that only the most niche and dedicated fanbase were willing to financially commit, which in the long run was not a viable market decision for long-term support and development costs. In the home entertainment industry side, 3D TVs were only a hyped fad, which lasted only a few years, from 2010 to 2013, and being fully dead by 2017. 3D TVs in the media may be long dead, but in the gaming space, Lenovo and Samsung are trying to make 3D have a comeback. Announced at Tech World Shanghai in May 2025, the Lenovo Legion 9i laptop has support for 2D and a 3D display SKU. Lenovo has said that the 3D technology being supported for this is reminiscent of Nintendo's new 3DS. Just like with Nintendo's previous handheld, the 3D will be achieved glasses-free with the use of lenticular lenses and eye tracking. The 9i is also being marketed as a non-gaming laptop as well, for being used in the 3D modeling space without needing a special external 3D display or HMD. With GeForce 3D Vision being long gone, Lenovo has said that the 9i's 3D display currently supports around 30 games in their proprietary 3D Studio, which supports titles like Cyberpunk 2077 and Black Myth Wukong. In April 2025, Samsung revealed a 3D Odyssey display that utilizes the same lenticular lens and eye tracking tech in the i9. Based on their previous model from 2009, which used Nvidia GeForce's 3D shutter glasses, this was a major upgrade. Also being advertised for gaming, the compatibility for the 3D support of the Odyssey is only available in a proprietary suite called the Samsung Reality Hub. Samsung plans to have the number of supported Reality Hub games to be 50 by the end of 2025, but is only currently at 14. This promise of potential support with an upfront purchase of $2,000 is likely too much for most customers to gamble on. While both of these products are valiant efforts to revitalize 3D to be mainstream, due to the current premium prices and limited support, these will likely only be used by a sliver of users, with the majority of the market still moving on from this fad. One of the biggest factors for the death of 3D was because it was replaced with technology that could provide a more visceral and realistic experience. Instead of 3D, which had the promise of the media being entertained coming to you passively, this new technology would put you in the game. Next time, we'll take a look at the history and future of VR tech in the gaming space, how it started, and its status as a viable option for gaming. I'll see you then!